Um, okay, so we talked about morality, the changing standards, right? We're having society, and y'all picked up a note set today with the dichotomy that I did last time, right? We're having the very liberal, the very conservative. If we're looking at Waxahachie on this time, where would Waxahachie be? Conservative. But we're seeing that the war is really playing into this. We're seeing the 19th Amendment playing into this. And we see that women they're not being Victorian, right? We have the new role for the woman, the flapper, right? That they're asserting their independence. Automobiles at this time, we know that Ford is making the car affordable for the average American because he's putting it on that conveyor belt. And so the Model T used to go for $900, now it's going for $300. And so people are using the automobile. We're going to see it's going to be used by organized crime. Why? Transport alcohol. And so the transporting of alcohol, most of our illegal alcohol will be on the borders. So all of a sudden, y'all think of Al Capone, he's in Chicago. Other mobsters will be in Detroit, they'll be in Seattle, because they're going to go to Canada at this time, because Canada is going to have laws they could export alcohol. And so a lot of the crimes going on there. And then we're going to see rum runners in Florida. And then in Texas, we're going to see a lot of our organized gangs are along the border, because they're going to go over into North Mexico to get tequila. And then we're going to see people at this time that you probably know of, a guy named Jack Daniels. Yeah, he takes off with bathroom gin, okay? People are getting all this stuff. It's going into the speakeasy, so are people following the 18th Amendment? And it's because of the automobile that gangsters realize that they need to have someone who could drive fast. And so institutions like NASCAR take off at this time. Because you got to get a good driver, right? Who's able to dodge stuff. And also, young adults, because we do not have the term teenagers, start realizing the automobile is pretty cool because you can lay in the back seat and do some fun stuff. And so we're going to see looser morals at this time amongst our young adults. And a lot of it stems from Freudian psychology, which we talked about last time. We talked about the id, the ego, the superego, and then Oedipus Rex complex. And then the whole thing that if you repress your feelings, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get sick. And so this is going to be the blank check to those young adults that they should be able to liberate their feelings. We're going to see the Ku Klux Klan. It's against nearly everything except white Protestants, right? And it's going to set itself against that. And they're going to be the people that are going to really want that Emergency Quota Act and the Immigration Act that we saw on our study guide. The Democratic Party is really having a problem at this time because they want to put something in about the Klan. If they put something in about the Klan and restrict the Klan, they're going to lose their southern base. So do you think they put something restricting the Klan? No. Our next issue deals with the Scopes trials. At this time, there's two different types of beliefs, fundamentalism and modernism. Which one is the one that believes in the literal interpretation of the Bible? Which one's the one that likes science and religion? It's okay. And so this guy named John T. Scopes goes into Tennessee where they have a law that when they're teaching about evolution, everybody takes out their Bible and they go to Genesis. Do we do that in school today? No. And he's actually the substitute teacher. He comes in, he's been chopped up by the ACLU to do this, and he teaches it. Is he in violation of the law? So they fine him and they have a court case about it. Was it really ever about the court case? No, they had a big, huge fair, and y'all saw that in the video. What did they do at the fair? They brought in the monkeys. They had all this stuff, right? So it was a circus. Were they really concerned about the trial? Because when it came out at the end, was Scopes guilty? Yes, he had to pay a $100 fine, which then they waived. Yes.
At that time, how much was $100?
$100 is equivalent to about $1,000 today. Okay, so they waived it. So that's a lot of money. But at this time, we're seeing that religion is going to be taught in the Bible Belt of the South. And even then, in most books, all the way up into the 1960s, religion is still taught about how. Like even today, do y'all see that in your book? No, because most publishers have gone to evolution being in your book. And so this is going to be something that we will see reoccurring as we go through educational systems. We already talked about the quota laws. Which group of people are we looking at? What wave? Northern and Western or Southern and Eastern? Southern and Eastern. And we've seen during World War I, they actually have used stuff that developed in the Gilded Age, such as the IQ test to use during the war. The IQ test will be used at places like Ellis Island and Angel Island to determine the fitness of those immigrants coming into America. We're going to see that Tammany Hall is a political machine. They're still here. So are they buying the immigrants' votes? And people are going to use this as a reason why we restrict immigrants from coming into America. Prohibition, did it work? No. And I think Miss Morgan, I didn't get to do it on the video because I didn't, Miss Morgan taught you how to remember the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th Amendment. Incoming senators don't drink with women who, what? Vote. Okay, sorry. Who drink? Yes, they drink and vote at the same time. That's very dangerous. Okay, so the 18th Amendment didn't work. Eventually, the United States government, which we'll learn today, is going to come out with the 21st Amendment. Go ahead. They're going to come out with the 21st Amendment because did this Volstead Act, were they able to get the criminals? Did the people follow the laws? And so it's going to be hard for the United States to actually enforce a law that the people openly object. And so that's why the 21st Amendment comes out, which legalizes alcohol. So how old do you have to be to drink? So you always remember the 21st Amendment with how old you have to be able to drink. It used to be 18. But in the 1980s, the United States government is going to come around to the state saying, if you want us to fund your roads, you will raise the drinking age to 21. And one of the last states to do that was Louisiana. And that's why if you go through Louisiana, have you ever driven through Louisiana and realized how bad the roads are? It's because for 10 years, they did not get federal aid for those roads. And so now when they said, okay, we'll change it to 21, they had to go back and deal with all that road debacle, okay? So eventually I'm gonna get to the 21st Amendment. Al Capone is never gotten because what do you think he does to the police?
He puts them under his
Well,
rule.
he puts them under his rule by bribing them. And so they can't even enforce the Volstead Act because they're being bribed. And so eventually in the Great Depression, the US government needs to legalize alcohol so it could get tax revenue. But what we're gonna see, another reason why people were okay during the war to do this was because we were in war with Germany. And most of our brewers, if you look like Pabst, Anheuser-Busch, those were all German beers. And so that's why it rolled out from World War I that it was kind of okay to do this. Charles Lindbergh, y'all saw him. What feat did he do?
He was the first to travel across the
Yes, and he gets a big prize and he becomes a huge hero. And people become so obsessed with him that he becomes the first hero in America. And many people want to meet with him. And this is when they have the Lindbergh Law because someone wants to meet with him that they steal his child. And they go up to the second story of the house and steal him, but they're using a ladder on the outside. And when they come down the ladder, they actually drop the baby dies. And they keep on saying that they have the baby. And so this is why the Lindbergh Law comes out, that anybody who kills a kid, what's their automatic sentence? Death. And it becomes a federal offense if you take a kid across state lines. But Lindbergh, I'm going to bring him up when we get to World War II, because Lindbergh does not want the United States to get involved in World War II. He's going to call his movement America First. Make America Great Again. So we've seen this before. Yes, Braden.
Isn't that like kidnapping?
Yes, it is.
Isn't that when they cut like certain like letters out of?
They did cut the letters out and they put it in a thing. So in a letter to him to pay that ransom.
Wasn't it like the first time?
That was the first time that they've ever cut letters to do a note so people couldn't find the fingerprints on it or be able to do the pin analysis on it. Okay? We're going to see, I've already talked about the Red Scare. Who were we fearful of? Communist immigrants, right? And this is really crazy because President Coolidge says that all these communists are going to college. And when they're in college, they're trying to procreate with American women so that they can make what type of babies in America. And we're very fearful because have our women become a little bit more scandalous in the 1920s? Just a little bit, that we're fearful that we could have procreation of these socialist communist babies in America. And so we start to try to sequester women's behavior because we're fearful of them procreating. Someone in this class had Marcus Garvey as their progressive. Who had him? Anyone remembers their project? He did. And he had this the United Negro Improvement Association, where he said African Americans, they were living in a society that was essentially segregated, right? But most people within their community, they weren't black businesses. They were white businessmen. And these people were saying that could they go to the front of the line? If they were to get food, they had to go to the back. of the restaurant. And they were saying, let's create our own improvement organization that we had black businesses. Eventually, it's even going to endorse an idea of back to Africa, that we cannot get quality in America, that we should go back to Africa, take over Africa, and have equality there, which some of you are like, that seems kind of weird. But it's been done before by President Monroe. This is why we have Monrovia in Liberia, in Africa. Y'all are just looking at me like, okay, whatever. Okay, so in 1919, people owned, 1 out of 5 owned cars. We see films are big things. So y'all should have seen a couple of films on y'all study guide. The Jazz Singer, which is the first talking one. Did y'all have Birth of a Nation? Birth of a Nation is all about the Ku Klux Klan. It is the first motion picture that has a storyline. Okay, we're gonna see the radio. We saw it was created in Italy by this guy named Marconi, but it actually comes to America. Okay, the last thing I have to go through is this literature stuff. It's called The Lost Generation. Eventually in Miss Scott's class, y'all are gonna read The Great Gatsby, right? You don't do it to the end of the year. But let me explain why it's called The Lost Generation. It's called The Lost Generation because these guys, most of them go into World War I. And Woodrow Wilson says, we are going into this war to make the world safe for democracy. This is the war to end all wars. Really? Did it? So his idealism makes them very jaded. It makes them very emo. And they're going to start to write books. And we see the first one, T.S. Eliot, The Wasteland. Does he have a positive view on society? We're eventually going to see Ernest Hemingway write A Farewell to Arms, dealing with World War I. As I Lay Dying, another book. Are these people positive? And what you're going to see when Fitzgerald writes The Great Gatsby, he's going to talk about consumerism. That everybody feels that they could buy all this stuff and their life will be better. But is it? Their life is still hollow. And no matter how much they consume or know how much that they try to achieve, were they able to feel good inside? And that's why they're lost. Because they were sold on this idealism and they're never going to be able to achieve that. And in the 1920s, do we see people enjoying in their vices? And no matter how much they chased their vice, was it ever enough? And so that's what it means to be the lost generation. So if you ever have to do analysis on The Great Gatsby, there's your analysis. Okay? So last things, popular literature, I kind of went over that. We're done with this note set. I did, y'all had that dichotomy note set that I did with y'all last time. Remember that? It was this. Okay, if you flip to the back side, there's a couple of things that I need to go over on the back side. I just printed this out because I realized it wasn't on this one. This one on this side has the Volstead Act. The 18th Amendment said that the government no one can manufacture, transport, or make, or sell alcohol. The Volstead Act is what makes the police go look after it. And the police, they try to go look after it? But eventually the gangsters start to do what? Bribe them. And so that's why the Volstead Act's on here. I have to talk about education. Do y'all see it on part 8? At this time, we're going to see high school attendance becomes mandatory in America. It becomes compulsory. And we're going to see that all of a sudden we're going to get a more educated society, which is going to have an impact by the time we get to World War II. Okay, the last stuff is just our other people. Marcus Garvey, I have his Back to Africa roots stuff. Are we okay with this? The next thing I want you to take out is the causes of the Depression. Y'all have this? The causes of the Depression. There's a couple of blanks on it. I know you did your reading, so I'm going to quickly go through this because this is in lieu of chapter 32. So this one and then the boom to bust is in lieu of chapter 32 you having to do. So I want us to quickly look at the causes of the Depression. We're going to see the Great Depression lasted from 1929 to blank 1933. It is going to be the longest in U.S. history next to the Great Recession. We're going to see the U.S. economy reached its lowest point in 1932 and 1933. We're going to see in 1930 about 6 to 7 million men were out of work. Who do you think we're not counting? Women, because they were counting men as breadwinners. And in 1932, about 5 million were out of work. 5,000 banks closed in the first 3 years. Why would the banks close? What had the banks invested in? The stock market, and did they get their money back? No, and so people were upset, so they did the bank runs and tried to get their money, right? And when the banks didn't have their money, they just closed down. So if you didn't get your money from the bank, were you ever going to get your money? And so this is one of the repairs I'm going to talk about in the New Deal. We're going to see the country experience breadlines, soup kitchens, and Hooverville. So I don't know if you know what a Hooverville is. You're going to lose your house. So where are you going to live? A shanty town, and that's what a Hooverville is. I don't know if y'all know about Hoover flags. I wore pants today so I could be able to do this. People would walk around with their pockets out, and they would call them Hoover flags. Why? Why would they walk around with their pockets like... And so they're hoping someone sees their Hoover flags to do what? To give them. And sometimes they would walk around with Hoover blankets that were newspapers. Or they would sleep with them that would signal to someone, maybe give them a coat, give them a blanket. Who are people blaming for the depression? The government. And I'm going to talk why they blame the government. Okay, we're going to just look at this causes. It's worldwide. It's not only in America. We see that the foreign markets have put tariffs up. And when people are putting tariffs up, their goods become cheaper or more expensive. So do they want to trade? No. Okay, and this is what's happening today. We have put tariffs on China. China has put tariffs on us. We're not trading, and what has happened to our economy? It's slowed down. Okay, we're seeing that industries overproduce, and so there's so much of an item, so what happens to the price of the item? It goes down. We're seeing factories became more automated, so production increased, prices went down, people got unemployed. People started buying on credit, so that means that they have the money to pay it. No, and so debt is going to accumulate in America. Many people borrowed money from the banks to invest on the stock market. And so this led to another cause of the depression. We're going to see savings accounts were not insured, and I'm going to talk about how they're insured today. No effort was made by the government to fix this problem. What is that called when they're not doing something? We return to laissez-faire. And laissez-faire favors who? The people or business? Business. We're going to see following World War I, farmers grew too much. So what's going to happen to the prices of food? Go down. We're going to see the Dust Bowl created pandemonium in the plains, which is everything above Texas. And so if they cannot produce stuff, and we're going to get artificial scarcity, and what's going to happen to those prices for farm goods? It's going to go up. The government did tax cuts, but they didn't do them for everyone. They only did it for who? The rich. And they said that would trickle down. They would invest it in their business. But did they invest it in their business? They invested in yachts, in shiny things. And so it never made its way down to the bottom. We're going to see Great Britain also raised its interest rates, and there was a great unequal distribution of wealth. So this is just on the backside, a synopsis of what we just talked about. The high tariffs, the tax cuts, the philosophy, the breaking up of companies, deflation. And many people just think it's one day that the stock market crashed, but it's actually 2 days. The first day wasn't as bad, but it freaked people out that they started selling, and that's what made it worse. Okay, so what I want us to look at now is this boom to bust politics notes. This is in lieu of you doing chapter 32. You did a little bit of the causes, and I'm thinking y'all are very well versed in it. But I have to talk about what happened in the 1920s. One of the things that Harding is promising is a return to normalcy. Okay, so a return to normalcy. Is that World War I? So if World War I in the progressive era is not normal, what's normal now? What's the era before the progressive era? The Gilded Age, and that's what they returned to. In the Gilded Age, who was the government in the hands of? Business. They were laissez-faire. And that's what the 1920s is going to be, laissez-faire. There's going to be no regulation of businesses. So that two antitrust laws we know. What are the two antitrust laws we know? are not going to be enforced. So what's going to happen with wages? What are our labor unions going to be associated with? Anarchists, communists, socialists. So are they going to be able to achieve anything? Oh my gosh, all those progressive reforms that we were trying to achieve are now backpedaled. So we were going forward and now we're going where? Backwards. We see tariffs go up. Is that good? No, because we trade little with other nations. The Supreme Court is going to overturn progressive legislation. One of them that had the minimum wage and no child labor and special treatment for women is overturned. Child labor laws are not even enforced. They reduce the taxes on the rich. Do they reinvest that in their business? And we're going to see a scandal dealing with Teapot Dome. Teapot Dome had a lot of oil in it. So there was a president who conserved land. Y'all remember that president? Roosevelt. He says we need to keep some places safe. And they saved this area. But the Secretary of the Interior, Robert Fall, said, oh man, I can make a lot of money off this land, right? So he took bribes and he did what with it? Sold it. This will be our first person ever who is a secretary to ever be impeached in office because he sold this area. To who? Who would want this area full of oil? Business. Business. Are we having scandal just like we did in the Gilded Age? Harding, his heart is too faint. He dies. And his vice president takes over. His name is Silent Cal, or Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge is just another Harding. He believes business is the best. And what we're going to see is prosperity will happen as he enforces laissez-faire. But the U.S. realizes that we are owed money from Germany. And Germany needs to pay the Allies. And the Allies need to pay the U.S. So the U.S. comes up with a plan called the Dawes Plan, not to be confused with the Dawes Act. The U.S. realized who owes us money? Allies. Who owes the Allies money? Germany. And that Germany can't get its economy to take off. And so the U.S. decides that U.S. businessmen will float loans to Germany. And if this happens, their economy would take off and they would pay back who? And then the Allies could pay back? Great. And then eventually Germany would what? Pay back us. But what happens with the Dawes Plan is this money filters into Germany. Yes, they reindustrialize. But eventually down the road, this money will be used to go into war productions, which eventually leads to them remilitarizing, which means they're violating what treaty? Versailles. Treaty of Versailles, and we kind of just paid for what to start? I forgot to take attendance.
Oh, when you said you don't know what that bill was, that went off,
That was it. I'm going to talk about how eugenics, we kind of start that, right? We kind of start the opening funding for World War I. Okay, so the next thing on our notes, what does it say? Hoover versus Al Smith, right? I want you to look at those descriptions in this election. Tell me if they sound the same or they sound like the dichotomy. They do sound like the dichotomy. Who sounds like the conservative? Hoover or Smith? Who is the conservative there? Hoover. Who is the social liberal? Al Smith. And who do you think most people vote for? Hoover. Hoover makes some promises. The only person we're missing is Daniel, right? Who? Okay. Okay, so at this time, we're seeing that Hoover starts to make some trite promises. One of them on this note is that he says there will be a chicken in every pot and 2 cars in every garage. He says within our time period, poverty would be abolished. Oh, gosh. What has he just promised that would never happen? The Depression, right? And 6 months into his presidency, the Depression hits. And people were voting this guy because he says that every prosperity will be with us. now he gets in and he's laissez-faire. And I want us to look at this because we've had two main parties. What are our two main parties? Republicans and who? Okay, so I'm going to put it right here. I want you to tell me who the Democratic people are. Who does that party support?
Eugene V. Debs.
No, the people. Eugene V. Debs is a socialist. Okay, so we have Republicans over here. Do y'all remember what people they support each side? Which one supports business? Okay, which one supports the common man?
Democratic.
In the 1920s, what party reigned? Republicans, because we saw everything favored who? But prior to this time period, the Republicans have always been what? Big or small government? That's what we know today. But at this time, they used to be big. But in the actions of the 1920s, were they being big? They were being small government. Did that work out? But they're a small government too, right? So that's going to force this side that used to always be small government with Thomas Jefferson to do what? Did our parties just flip because of Hoover? Does this look like modern day parties today? And so Hoover realizes, okay, I'm small government, so should I do much to help the people? So he just sits there during the Depression saying, people, don't look at your government. Your government doesn't give you handouts. Go to your church. Oh, is he going to get reelected? No. And so he begins to change his tone closer to the election. And if y'all see, he's going to do a couple of things. We're going to get projects such as Hoover Dam. Is that going to employ people? But is that enough people to employ to end the Depression? No, he does the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which gives government money to agencies to employ people. Is that enough to end the Depression? No. He again tells people, don't look at your government for a handout. You go pull yourself up by the bootstraps. Is that going to get him a lot of votes? Who is he forgetting to help? Look, the common man. And so then he does the Agricultural and Adjustment Act. He forgets, I haven't helped the common man. He's going to lend money to farmers. Is he trying to help the common man here? But then he goes in and does the Norris-LaGuardia Injunction Act, which forbids federal courts to issue injunctions to restrain strikes. Gosh, is he doing a lot? No. Look at the next one. He raises the tariff. So what's going to happen to prices? They become more expensive. Does that help the common man? And then the common man marches on Washington. Soldiers from World War I. They march on Washington asking for their pay raises. And he has the military come in and arrest them for walking on the grass. We've seen this before with Coxey's army. Is he helping the common man? No. And so people begin to blame him for the Depression. There's Hoovervilles, Hoover blankets, Hoover flags. So looking at this, Herbert Hoover, despite his heartlessness, right? Because who was he not helping? He did inaugurate some significant new policies. He did create some work projects, right? In previous panics, people always had said it will work itself out. And it has, right? The government never came in. But now it's getting so severe that do the people want the government to intervene in the economy? Some people, yes, they need to. And some people are saying, no, just let it ride out. But what we're going to see is that Franklin Roosevelt is going to intervene in our economy a little bit more than Hoover did. So now it's Hoover who's saying the government should not help you versus FDR who's looking at the person who has not been helped. Who has not been helped? And he calls them the forgotten man. Because have they been forgotten? And he gives this speech called The Forgotten Man, saying the government has not helped you. The government needs to step up and help people now. And who do you think is going to win in 32? Who do you think is going to win? Hoover that does not help the people, or Roosevelt who's saying we should help the people? And so Roosevelt will win the election. And now this takes us into something else.